I knew Mason Whitmore had changed when my 6-year-old son called him dad in front of the only family whose judgment could still reach him. The word landed between the crystal glasses and polished silver like something alive. Every conversation at the Whitmore brunch stopped. Even the string quartet near the terrace seemed to fade beneath the silence. Noah stood beside an overturned water glass, the cuffs of his blue shirt dark with water, one hand wrapped around Mason's fingers as if he were holding on to the safest thing in the room. Mason had crossed the length of the dining hall the moment his uncle raised his voice at my son. He had not shouted. Mason Whitmore never needed to. He had simply stepped between them, lowered himself to Noah's height, and used his own linen napkin to dry the water from Noah's hands. It was an accident, Mason said, calm enough to make everyone else uncomfortable. Then Noah threw his arms around his neck. I knew Dad would come. My serving spoon slipped from my hand and struck the marble floor. Mason froze. His mother, Victoria, slowly placed her coffee cup on its saucer. Across the table, a dozen members of the Whitmore family stared at me as though I had smuggled a scandal into their home beneath my chef's jacket. I could not breathe. Noah had never called anyone dad. Not once. Not even by mistake. Mason lifted his eyes to mine over my son's shoulder, and for one impossible second, the coldest man I had ever met looked just as frightened as I felt. 5 weeks earlier, the first thing I gave Mason Whitmore was not a reason to trust me. It was smoke. Thick, gray, humiliating smoke curled toward the 12-foot ceiling of the Whitmore kitchen, while an alarm shrieked above my head. I stood in front of a commercial griddle with a spatula in one hand, and a pancake shaped like the state of Ohio in the other. "Mom," Noah said from his stool near the pantry, "I think breakfast is yelling." "Breakfast is expressing itself," I told him, waving a dish towel beneath the smoke detector. "There is a difference." The kitchen staff did not laugh. They were too busy moving with the sharp panic of people who believed one burned pancake could end their careers. Maybe it could. The Whitmore estate sat on 30 acres outside Greenwich, Connecticut, and contained more rooms than my apartment building had tenants. The kitchen alone was larger than the diner where I had worked after culinary school. Everything gleamed. Copper pans, white marble counters, steel appliances with more settings than my car. I had signed a 6-week contract 3 days earlier to cover for the family's private chef while he recovered from surgery. It was supposed to mean excellent pay, reasonable hours, and enough savings to stop pretending my car's check engine light was decorative. My shift began before Noah's school opened, so the house manager had agreed that he could sit quietly in the kitchen until I drove him to the school's morning program at 8:30. Instead, on my first morning, I had filled a billionaire's house with smoke before 7:15. The kitchen doors opened. The room changed before I even turned around. People straightened. Voices vanished. A man entered wearing a charcoal suit that fit as if someone had measured every inch of him twice and trusted nothing to chance. Mason Whitmore was 29. But he carried himself like a man who had spent 40 years being disappointed by other people. Dark hair, gray eyes, perfect posture, no expression. I had seen his face in business magazines beside phrases like aggressive acquisition and youngest chief executive in Whitmore history. In person, he looked less like a businessman and more like the human version of a locked door. His gaze moved from the smoke to the alarm, then to the pancake hanging from my spatula. "What happened?" he asked. The house manager opened his mouth, probably to sacrifice me professionally. I answered first. "A disagreement over timing." Mason looked at me. "With whom?" "The pancake." Noah covered his mouth, but his laugh escaped anyway. Mason's eyes shifted toward him. Most adults looked at Noah and saw a child who should be quieter, cleaner, or somewhere else. Mason studied him as if his presence required an explanation. "Why is there a boy in my kitchen?" "Because leaving him home alone is frowned upon," I said. "It is also illegal." The house manager made a small choking sound. I should have stopped talking. Exhaustion had always made me brave in ways good judgment did not approve of. Mason looked back at me. "You are the temporary chef. Claire Bennett." I set the pancake on a small plate. One side was nearly black. The other was golden around the edges and soft in the middle. "This side is a little tragic, but the other side still has potential." Noah nodded seriously. "That is what she says about our car." And Mondays, I added. Something shifted near Mason's mouth. Not a smile. More like the memory of one passing through. He walked toward the counter and looked at the ruined pancake. My family expects breakfast at 8. Then I have 45 minutes to become unforgettable for a better reason. His eyes held mine. Cold, controlled, and far too observant. Do not set off another alarm. No promises, but I will lower the odds. He turned to leave. At the doorway, Noah called after him. Do you like pancakes? Mason stopped without looking back. No, have you tried my mom's? Apparently not successfully. This time I saw it. A brief curve at the corner of his mouth before he disappeared into the hall. The staff exhaled together. I rebuilt breakfast from scratch. Lemon ricotta pancakes, crisp bacon, berries warmed with maple syrup, eggs folded with chives. By 8, the dining room was perfect, the silver was polished, and no one could smell the disaster that had nearly ended my first day. Mason never came to the table. I watched him pass the open doorway with a phone against his ear, his steps even, his face unreadable. He did not glance at the food. He did not slow down. He never eats breakfast, one of the servers whispered. Then why does the family employ 3 people to make it? I asked. She looked toward the hallway. This house does many things because it always has. That evening, after the last dish was washed and Noah had fallen asleep in a chair with his cheek pressed against his backpack, I almost threw the burned pancake away. Instead, I left it on its plate beside the sink. Ridiculous, I know. It was only flour, milk, and one very public mistake. Still, it felt like proof that I had survived the morning. I gathered Noah into my arms and went home. The next morning, the plate was empty. Beside it sat one silver fork and a faint streak of maple syrup. The empty plate bothered me more than it should have. I stood beside the sink at 6:45 while the kitchen slowly came alive around me. Someone had eaten the pancake. Not one of the lemon ricotta pancakes from breakfast. The burned one. The misshapen one I had left beside the sink like evidence from a crime committed against breakfast. I looked at the silver fork, then at the faint line of syrup on the plate. You are investigating a dish, Noah said from his stool. He was coloring a dinosaur purple because, according to him, green was an unreasonable limitation. I am gathering facts. Maybe the pancake escaped. With a fork. Maybe it had help. I glanced toward the hall. The house was quiet except for distant footsteps and the low hum of the industrial refrigerator. Did you see anyone take it? Noah shook his head. But the serious man came into the kitchen after you carried me out. My hand stopped. Mason. The one who looks like he is always reading bad news. That description was so accurate I almost laughed. Did he say anything? He asked if the pancake was still needed. And what did you tell him? I said no because you were going to throw it away. Thank you for protecting my reputation. You said honesty matters. I was hoping you would apply that lesson selectively. Noah returned to his dinosaur, leaving me with one impossible thought. Mason Whitmore had eaten my burned pancake. I told myself it meant nothing. Hungry people made strange decisions. Rich people probably made stranger ones because no one was brave enough to stop them. At 7:55, I carried breakfast into the dining room. Victoria Whitmore sat at the far end of a table long enough to require its own weather forecast. Her silver blonde hair was perfectly arranged, her posture straight, her expression calm in the way only deeply critical people could manage. Ruth Whitmore sat opposite her wearing a red silk scarf and the satisfied smile of a woman who enjoyed arriving where she had not been invited. You are the new cook, Ruth said. Temporary chef, Victoria corrected without looking at me. That is what I said, only with fewer syllables. I placed a platter of cinnamon French toast between them. Ruth inhaled and closed her eyes. This smells like someone loved it while making it. Victoria examined the berries as if they had submitted incomplete paperwork. Mason will not be joining us. Mason never joins us, Ruth said. That is different. At exactly 8, he passed the doorway with his phone in one hand and a leather folder beneath his arm. His gaze touched the table then moved to me. For half a second I thought he might mention the pancake. He kept walking. Noah leaned toward me and whispered much too loudly. Ask him if he ate the burned one. Every head turned. Mason stopped. My dignity quietly left the room. "Noah," I said. Inside voice. That was my inside voice. Ruth covered a smile with her coffee cup. Mason looked at my son. "What burned one?" Noah pointed at me. "Mom thinks someone ate her mistake." Mason's expression did not change, but his eyes shifted toward the empty place setting beside Ruth. Perhaps she should make fewer mistakes. Perhaps someone should stop eating the evidence, I replied. Victoria's fork paused above her plate. The kitchen doorway suddenly felt several miles away. Mason studied me long enough for the room to tighten around the silence. Then he said, "Your French toast is getting cold." He continued down the hall. Ruth watched him disappear. "Interesting." "There is nothing interesting about breakfast," Victoria said. "That may be why your son avoids it," Ruth replied. The next morning, I left a small pancake beneath a silver warming cover at the empty place beside Ruth. Mason passed without stopping. The pancake remained untouched. On the second morning, Noah added 3 blueberries in the shape of a face. Mason glanced at it and kept walking. On the third, Noah wrote his name on a folded card and placed it beside the plate. Mason did not even slow down. "He does not like us," Noah said after the dining room emptied. "He does not know us. That is taking him a long time. Some people need more time." "How much?" I looked toward the hall where Mason had vanished. More than 3 pancakes, apparently. On the fourth morning, rain tapped softly against the tall windows. Victoria had left early for a foundation meeting. Ruth claimed a headache and ordered breakfast in her room, though I suspected she was staging something. Noah and I sat at one end of the dining table while I reviewed the afternoon menu. He ate silver-dollar pancakes and told me a detailed story about a classmate who believed the moon belonged to Texas. Mason appeared in the doorway at 8:12. No phone. No folder. Just a white shirt, dark trousers, and the same guarded expression. Noah looked up. "I saved you one." Mason glanced at the covered plate. "I do not eat breakfast." "Why?" "I am not hungry." Noah considered that. "Are you not hungry, or are you lonely?" My pencil slipped across the menu. "Noah." "What?" "They sound similar." Mason went completely still. The rain filled the silence between us. I expected him to leave. Instead, he walked into the room and pulled out the chair beside Noah. He sat as though the decision had surprised him too. "5 minutes," he said. Noah lifted the silver cover with both hands. Beneath it sat one small pancake, slightly uneven, with blueberries arranged into a crooked smile. "This one is not burned," he promised. Mason picked up the fork. "That is an improvement. Mom says improvement should be celebrated. Your mother says many things. She talks when she is nervous." "Noah Bennett," I warned. Mason cut into the pancake. He chewed slowly, his face unreadable. Noah leaned closer. "Well, it is acceptable. That means he likes it," I translated. Mason looked at me. "That is not what acceptable means. In this house, it might be the closest thing." The corner of his mouth moved. Noah saw it and grinned so widely that Mason looked away first. 5 minutes became 7, then 10. Mason asked Noah about school. Noah asked Mason why he owned so many buildings if he could only sleep in one room. Mason said that was not how business worked. Noah said it sounded inefficient. I tried not to laugh and failed. For the first time since I arrived, the dining room did not feel like a museum displaying expensive people. It felt warm, ordinary, almost small. The next morning, Mason was already seated when we entered. He had placed his phone face down beside his coffee. "You are early," I said. "You are late." I checked the clock. It was 7:58. By billionaire standards? By mine. Noah climbed into the chair beside him. "Did you miss us?" Mason lifted his coffee. "No, that means yes," Noah told me. It became a habit without anyone admitting it. Mason arrived at 8. Noah saved him the smallest pancake. I drove Noah to school at 8:20, then returned to the estate before lunch preparations began. I pretended not to notice when Mason began scheduling calls after breakfast instead of during it. Some mornings he stayed 6 minutes. Some mornings 20. He never spoke about his family. He never explained why the formal table seemed to make his shoulders tighten. But I noticed he relaxed when Noah talked. I noticed he ate more when no one watched him. I noticed he always left before Victoria entered the room. One Friday evening, a storm delayed my babysitter and forced Noah to remain at the estate while I prepared dinner for a private meeting. He built a city from sugar packets at the kitchen table, then fell asleep with his head on his folded arms. I was lifting a tray from the oven when Mason walked in. He had removed his suit jacket, and exhaustion had softened the hard lines of his face. He looked at Noah. How long has he been asleep? 10 minutes. I set down the tray and wiped my hands. I was about to carry him to the staff sitting room. Mason reached him first. He moved carefully, one arm beneath Noah's knees, the other supporting his back. Noah stirred and pressed his cheek against Mason's shoulder without waking. Mason froze for one breath. Then his hand settled gently between my son's shoulder blades. The gesture was so natural it hurt to watch. He carried Noah through the quiet hall as if the child weighed nothing and mattered more than everything. That was the moment I understood Mason Whitmore was not cold. Cold men did not hold sleeping children like promises. He was simply a man who had learned to hide every gentle part of himself before anyone could take it away. The first thing Mason ever fixed for Noah was a plastic fire truck worth $12, and he approached it with the concentration of a man negotiating the future of a country. One wheel had fallen off during breakfast and rolled beneath the dining table. Noah crawled after it. Mason reached it first. "It is broken," Noah said, holding out the truck with the solemn expression children reserve for disasters adults cannot understand. Mason turned it over in his hands. "The axle is loose. Can you fix it?" "Probably." Mom says probably means yes when grown-ups are afraid to promise. Mason looked at me. I kept my attention on the bowl of pancake batter, though my smile betrayed me. He carried the truck into his study. 20 minutes later, he returned with the wheels secured, the scratched plastic polished, and a tiny screwdriver still in his shirt pocket. Noah tested it across the marble floor. The truck rolled straight. "You made it better," he said. Mason adjusted his cuff as if the compliment had made him uncomfortable. "I restored its basic function." "That means better," Noah told me. After that, Mason began appearing in our lives through small things. He learned that Noah refused to eat sandwich crusts but would accept the same crusts if I cut the bread into stars. He discovered that children asked questions during every important phone call and did not care whether the person on the other end controlled 300 hotels. He began keeping colored pencils in the bottom drawer of his desk, though he claimed they belonged to the household. One Tuesday morning, Noah announced that his first grade class was performing a song about the 50 states. "I am Wyoming," he said proudly. Mason looked up from his coffee. "You are a state?" "I hold the sign." "That sounds like a significant responsibility." "It is Friday at 2. Noah slid a folded invitation across the table. "You can come if you do not have billionaire work." Mason glanced at the invitation. "I have a board meeting." Noah nodded, trying to look as though he had expected the answer. "That is okay. Wyoming understands." Friday arrived with bright October sunlight and a wind strong enough to scatter leaves across the elementary school parking lot. I sat in the second row of the auditorium, surrounded by parents holding phones above their heads. Noah stood on stage wearing a paper cowboy hat and gripping a sign almost as wide as his shoulders. He searched the audience before the music began. His eyes found me. He smiled, but I saw the question he was trying not to ask. Then the auditorium doors opened. Mason entered in a dark suit, speaking quietly into his phone. He ended the call, silenced the device, and sat beside me as if powerful men attended first-grade performances every day. "Your meeting," I whispered. "Rescheduled." For Wyoming, the schedule had flexibility. Noah saw him. His entire face changed. He lifted the Wyoming sign too early and nearly covered the child standing beside him. Mason applauded before anyone else did. That evening he drove us home because my car refused to start in the Whitmore driveway. I expected a driver. Mason took the wheel himself. Noah fell asleep in the back seat before we reached the highway, his cowboy hat tilted over his eyes. The inside of Mason's car smelled like leather and cedar, quiet and expensive. My apartment was 14 miles from the estate, but the distance between our lives felt much greater. You did not have to come today, I said. I know. He will remember that you did. Mason watched the road. So will I. He parked in front of my building and carried Noah upstairs without commenting on the narrow hallway, the flickering light, or the neighbor's bicycle chained to the railing. He waited while I unlocked the door, then placed Noah gently on the couch. My apartment looked even smaller with Mason standing inside it. The kitchen table doubled as my desk. A laundry basket sat near the window. 2 magnets held overdue repair notices to the refrigerator. I waited for embarrassment to arrive. It did not. This was my home. Every imperfect inch of it. Mason noticed the stack of culinary textbooks beside the table. You are studying? Business management at night. I want my own restaurant someday. How much capital do you need? That was fast. It is a practical question. And I have a practical answer. More than I have, less than you would assume, and none that comes with someone else owning my decisions. He studied me. I could arrange financing. I know. You have not heard the terms. You have not heard the answer. His expression cooled, but I had learned that coldness was often the first wall he raised when something mattered. Why refuse help before it is offered? Because men with money sometimes confuse helping with choosing. The room went quiet. Noah breathed softly from the couch. Mason looked toward him, then back at me. I would not use money to control you. I believe you would try not to. That answer stayed between us after he left. Noah's biological father had left before my son learned to walk. He had surrendered every responsibility willingly, sent no birthday cards, and asked no questions. I never taught Noah to hate a man he did not know. I simply built a life that did not depend on his return. Noah understood that some children had fathers and some did not, but he had never given that name to anyone. I had never asked him to invent one. The following Monday, a photograph appeared in the society section of a newspaper Victoria had left beside her coffee. Mason stood at a charity gala beside a tall blonde woman in a silver dress. The caption identified her as Caroline Ashford, daughter of a banking family, and described them as a natural match. I read the sentence twice before setting the paper down. Mason entered moments later. He saw the photograph. Then he saw my face. Caroline is a family friend, he said. I did not ask. You were thinking it. You cannot possibly know what I am thinking. You press your lips together when you are pretending not to care. Noah looked between us. Is she going to be your family? Mason went still. What do you mean? When you marry her, will you stop eating breakfast with us? I wanted to rescue him from the question. I wanted to rescue Noah from the answer. Mason looked toward the empty chair at the head of the table. He had never sat there. Not once. I am not marrying Caroline, he said. But someday you might have a real family, Noah continued. Then where do we go? Mason did not answer. His silence hurt more than the wrong words would have. Noah lowered his eyes to his plate. Mason rose and left the room. Later that day, Noah asked me a question while I packed his lunch. Is a dad the person who stays when things get hard? My hand stopped over the sandwich bag. A good one does. Even when people are mad? Especially then. He nodded as if he had stored the answer somewhere important. I found Mason that evening in the dark dining room, standing behind the chair he always avoided. Rain tapped against the windows. His hand rested on the carved wooden back. My father sat here, he said before I could speak. Every morning was a review. Grades. Posture. Mistakes. He believed breakfast prepared a person for judgment. That is not breakfast. It was in this house. His voice remained controlled, but the truth beneath it was not. When he died, everyone expected me to take his seat. I could not. I walked to the opposite end of the table and gripped the chair. It was heavy, solid oak, built to remain exactly where someone had decided it belonged. I dragged it across the floor. The legs scraped loudly against the marble. Mason stared at me. I placed the chair beside Noah's usual seat. What are you doing? Changing what it means. Claire. A chair is not a memory unless you keep treating it like one. The next morning, Noah and I entered the dining room at 7:58. Mason was already there. He sat in his father's chair, no longer at the head of the table, but beside the place Noah had saved for him. His phone was face down. His coffee was untouched. In front of him waited one small pancake shaped like a star. The morning Mason sat in his father's chair was the morning Victoria Whitmore decided the house had become too comfortable. She announced a family brunch for Sunday with the same calm voice people used when ordering flowers, but every member of the staff understood that it was not a social gathering. It was a correction. By 9 o'clock, the dining room glittered beneath 3 crystal chandeliers. White roses stood in silver vases. Place cards marked seats for relatives who own newspapers, banks, and enough property to believe every room belonged to them. I worked in the kitchen with flour on my sleeve and a knot beneath my ribs, preparing rosemary biscuits, smoked salmon, maple-glazed bacon, and enough food to feed people who would spend most of the meal pretending not to be hungry. Noah sat at the corner table coloring a picture of a house with a red roof. "Why are there so many forks?" he asked. "Rich people need options." "For eating. Mostly for judging which fork everyone else uses." He considered that, then added another chimney to his drawing. Through the service doors I heard Victoria welcome Caroline Ashford. Her voice warmed in a way it never did for me. Caroline arrived wearing pale blue and carrying herself with effortless grace. She was beautiful, polite, and completely blameless in the situation everyone else seemed determined to create. When she entered the kitchen to compliment the food, she smiled at Noah and asked about his drawing. "That is my house," he told her. "Mom is here. I am here. Mason is here, but he does not know how to draw hair, so I made his head a circle." Caroline looked at me, and something like understanding passed across her face. "It looks like a happy house," she said. Victoria appeared behind her. "Caroline, everyone is waiting." Her eyes moved to the drawing before settling on me. "Claire, brunch will be served in 5 minutes. Your son should remain in the kitchen." "He will." "Good." She turned away then paused. "This is an important day for Mason." The meaning was clear. Do not become part of it. Brunch began with quiet music and careful conversation. I moved between the kitchen and dining room, setting down platters while the Whitmores discussed hotel expansions, foundation boards, and people who were not present to defend themselves. Mason sat beside Ruth rather than at the head of the table. His father's chair remained next to Noah's empty place, where Mason had moved it days earlier. Victoria noticed. Of course she noticed. "Mason," she said, "your seat is at the head." "I am aware." "Then why are you sitting there?" He unfolded his napkin. "Because I chose to." Ruth buttered a biscuit. A dangerous family tradition. Choice. Several relatives smiled without enjoying the joke. Caroline sat across from Mason, composed but uncomfortable. Victoria began speaking about a proposed partnership between Whitmore Holdings and Ashford Financial. She mentioned legacy, stability, and shared values. She did not say marriage. She did not need to. I carried in a pitcher of water and felt Mason's eyes follow me across the room. I kept my attention on the glasses. My job was simple. Serve the meal. Protect Noah. Leave before anyone could turn us into a problem. Then the kitchen door opened. Noah stepped into the dining room holding his picture. "Mom, where is the tape?" Every face turned toward him. "In the kitchen, sweetheart." I looked. He moved toward me, but one of the servers stepped backward at the same moment. Noah swerved to avoid her and bumped the side table. A water glass tipped. Clear liquid spread across the white tablecloth and dripped onto the polished floor. The room went silent. "Good heavens," said Charles Whitmore, Mason's uncle. "Why is that child wandering through a formal family event?" Noah froze. "I am sorry. This is precisely why staff should not bring children into the workplace," Charles continued. "There are standards in this house." I set down the pitcher. "He made a mistake. I will clean it." The mistake was allowing him here at all. Noah's face changed. His shoulders folded inward. I knew that look. It was the look children wore when adults made them feel as though their existence required an apology. I stepped toward him. Mason reached him first. He crossed the dining room without hurry, but every voice disappeared as he moved. He knelt in front of Noah, took a linen napkin from the table, and dried the water from his hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Noah shook his head. "I spilled it." "Yes." "Are you mad?" "No." Charles gave an impatient sigh. "Mason, we are in the middle of an important discussion." Mason looked over his shoulder. "Then discuss something important." "Excuse me." A 6-year-old spilled water. You responded as though he damaged the family name. His voice remained quiet. That made it stronger. Victoria placed her hand beside her plate. "Mason, this does not require a scene." "I agree. It required kindness." Noah stared at him with wide eyes. Mason turned back and adjusted the damp cuff of his shirt. "It was an accident," he said. That was when Noah wrapped both arms around Mason's neck. "I knew Dad would come." My serving spoon struck the marble floor. The sound echoed beneath the chandeliers. Mason went still. Victoria slowly lowered her coffee cup. Caroline looked down at her hands. Every Whitmore at the table stared at Noah, then at me, as if they had discovered a secret arrangement written across my face. I could not move. Noah had never used that word for anyone. Mason lifted his eyes to mine over my son's shoulder. His expression held no anger, only surprise, fear, and something so tender I almost looked away. Victoria stood. "Claire, did you teach him to say that?" "No." My voice came out steady even though nothing inside me was. "I would never do that. Children repeat what they hear." He did not hear it from me. Charles leaned back in his chair. "This has gone far enough." Mason rose slowly with Noah still holding his hand. "No," he said. "It has not." He looked at his family, then at the empty chair beside his own. Claire did not teach him that word. Victoria's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened around the back of her chair. Mason glanced down at Noah. He saw something the adults in this room have chosen not to see. No one spoke. Mason pulled out the chair beside him and looked at me. "Sit down, Claire. I am working." "Not now." Victoria's voice sharpened. "She is the chef." Mason held my gaze. "She is also my guest." The distance between the kitchen and that chair felt greater than every mile between my apartment and the estate. I removed my apron. I walked past the silver platters, the white roses, and the people who believed I should know my place. Then I sat beside him. Noah climbed into the chair on Mason's other side as if he had always belonged there. Ruth lifted her coffee with a satisfied smile. "Finally," she said. "A family brunch." Victoria did not speak again until the meal ended. She found me alone in the kitchen, standing beside a sink full of untouched crystal glasses. The doors closed softly behind her. "You do not understand what you have started," she said. "I did not start anything. My son has spent his entire life carrying this family. He does not get to abandon his responsibilities because your child gave him a name." I turned to face her. Noah did not ask him to abandon anything. Victoria stepped closer, her voice low and perfectly controlled. "Then understand this clearly. People who force Mason to choose usually discover how much that choice costs." She walked away before I could answer, leaving the kitchen colder than it had ever felt before. Victoria did not raise her voice, but her warning followed me through the rest of the day like a draft beneath a closed door. I finished the dishes. I packed the leftovers. I smiled when Noah asked whether rich people always ate so slowly. Then I drove home with both hands tight around the steering wheel and Mason's silence sitting beside me, even though he was miles away. He called before I reached the highway. I watched his name glow on the dashboard and let it ring. He called again when I parked outside our building. I let that one ring too. By the time Noah and I reached the apartment, there were 3 messages. The first asked whether we were home safely. The second said we needed to talk. The third contained only 4 words. "Please do not disappear." I stood in the kitchen beneath the weak yellow light, staring at the phone while Noah changed into pajamas. Disappearing had never been my style. Leaving before someone could push my son aside was different. The next morning, I arrived at the estate before sunrise. The kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. I packed my knives, my notebooks, and the blue apron Noah had decorated with a crooked sun. Ruth found me wrapping my cast iron skillet in a dish towel. "That looks final," she said. "It needs to be." "For whom?" I folded the towel more tightly. For Noah. Ruth studied me with the sharp patience of someone who already knew the answer. And for you. I can survive. Being treated like I do not belong. I will not teach him to accept it. Mason will not let you leave easily. That is part of the problem. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Mason entered without a jacket, his white shirt wrinkled and his sleeves rolled to his forearms. His face was drawn with exhaustion. He looked at the boxes on the counter, then at me. What are you doing? Leaving? No, the word came too quickly. Too naturally. Like a command he expected the world to obey. I continued packing. That is not your decision. My mother spoke to you. Your mother clarified the situation. His jaw tightened. I will handle her. That is what you keep saying. Handle her. Handle the family. Handle the problem. You keep trying to control every room after someone else has already been hurt in it. Claire, stop. No. You stop. The kitchen went still. Even Ruth quietly moved toward the door, though she did not leave. Mason lowered his voice. You and Noah are not leaving because of something Victoria said. We are leaving because Noah should never wonder whether calling someone family is something he will be punished for. He will not be punished. He already felt ashamed. Mason looked away. That small movement told me he remembered Noah's face. I can fix this, he said. You cannot fix people with arrangements. I can create distance between you and my family. By doing what? Moving us somewhere nicer? Giving me a restaurant? Putting money between us until no one can reach me without your permission. His eyes sharpened. I would never do that. You already tried to offer financing before asking what I wanted. Because I wanted to help. No. You wanted to remove the problem. Silence pressed against the steel counters. Mason reached into the folder beneath his arm and placed several pages in front of me. This is not control. I did not touch them. What is it? A preliminary proposal for a vacant restaurant space in Stamford. Whitmore Holdings owns the property. The kitchen is already equipped, and the legal team drafted a 1-year rent-free term sheet this morning. I stared at him. You ordered your legal team to prepare this overnight? Yes. Without asking me. I knew you would refuse if I asked. Then you knew the answer. His face hardened, not with anger, but with panic wearing anger's clothes. I am trying to give you security. And I am trying to make you understand that security is not the same as being trapped inside someone else's solution. Nothing about this traps you. Then why does it feel as though I have to accept your version of my future to stay in your life? That stopped him. I saw the words reach the place he protected most. His shoulders lowered by half an inch. What do you want me to do? He asked. It was the first honest question he had given me. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him to come with us, to choose us, to say something brave enough to make staying possible. But Noah appeared in the doorway holding the small brass key from his toy fire station. Mason had given it to him days earlier after fixing the truck. Noah called it the key to our breakfast house. He walked across the kitchen and placed it in Mason's palm. I think you need this back, he said. Mason closed his fingers around it. Why? Mom says we are not coming tomorrow. Mason looked at me, but Noah continued. You are nice when it is just us. Then your family comes and you look scared. Mason knelt in front of him. I am not scared of them. Noah considered that with the seriousness of a judge. Then why did Mom have to be brave by herself? Mason had no answer. Noah's eyes filled, but he did not cry. I called you Dad because dads stay near you when people are mean. His voice grew smaller. Maybe you are still learning. Mason looked down at the key in his hand. Maybe I am. We left before breakfast. Mason did not stop us. That hurt more than if he had tried. The first evening without the estate felt strangely quiet. Noah built a fort in the living room while I updated my resume and searched for kitchen jobs within 20 miles. At 7:30 someone knocked. For one foolish second my heart leaped. It was Ruth. She carried a paper bag from a bakery and wore the same red scarf from brunch. I brought pie, she said. Emotional. Crises require butter. I let her in. She sat at our small table, looked around the apartment and smiled. This feels more like a home than that mansion has in 30 years. How is he? I asked before I could stop myself. Ruth opened the bag. Sitting alone in the dining room. He does that. Not like this. She placed Noah's drawing on the table. The red-roofed house. Me. Noah. Mason with the round head. He found this beneath the chair, she said. He has been staring at it for an hour. I swallowed. He will recover. That is not what worries me. Ruth leaned closer. Mason has spent his life believing love is something you protect by controlling every possible outcome. You were the first person who showed him that love also requires surrender. He did not surrender anything. Not yet. Ruth told me later what happened after she left our apartment. Across town, Mason sat alone in a dining room large enough to seat 20 people. In front of him was a plate of perfect pancakes prepared by one of the finest chefs in Connecticut. The edges were golden. The centers were soft. Nothing was burned. Nothing was uneven. He lifted his fork, then set it down. He remained there until the coffee went cold, holding a child's brass key in one hand and staring at the empty chair beside him. For the first time in his life, Mason Whitmore had everything arranged exactly as it should be. And nothing he wanted remained. 6 days later, Sunday morning arrived with rain against the windows and a knock at our door just after 7. I was still wearing my oldest sweatshirt. Noah was building a cardboard airport across the living room floor, and neither of us expected visitors. When I opened the door, Mason stood in the hallway without a suit, a driver, or anything that could make the narrow space seem less ordinary. He wore dark jeans, a gray sweater, and an expression I had never seen on him before. Uncertainty. In one hand he carried a paper grocery bag. In the other, he held an old cast-iron skillet. Ruth gave me this, he said. She said it belonged to her mother, back when breakfast in that house still sounded like laughter. Behind me, Noah appeared in dinosaur pajamas. Mason looked at him first. Not at me. Not at the apartment. At him. May I come in? He asked. It was such a simple question. It was also the first time Mason Whitmore had stood at the edge of my life without assuming the door would open. I stepped aside. He entered carefully, as if our home contained something fragile that money could not replace. Noah watched the grocery bag. What is in there? Flour, eggs, milk, blueberries. Mason placed it on the kitchen table. I came to make breakfast. Noah looked at me. Can billionaires cook? We are about to discover whether wealth has hidden talents. Mason set the skillet beside the stove, then reached into his pocket and placed the small brass key on the table. I also came to return this. Noah picked it up. You said it was yours. I was wrong. Mason lowered himself until they were eye to eye. He did not touch Noah. He waited. You told me I was still learning how to be what you needed. You were right. Noah studied him with the serious expression he usually saved for math problems and injured toys. Did you learn? Some of it. What part? Mason looked down at his hands. That staying near someone when everything is easy does not make you family. Staying when it becomes uncomfortable does. Noah was quiet. Mason continued. I should have stood beside your mother before she had to defend both of you alone. I should have asked what she needed instead of deciding what I could give her. I am sorry. Are you sorry because we left? Noah asked. Yes. Mason lifted his eyes. But I am more sorry that I gave you a reason to leave. Noah turned the brass key over in his fingers. Mom says sorry is only real when the next thing is different. Your mother says many difficult things. She talks when she is nervous. I remember. Noah placed the key back into Mason's palm, then curled Mason's fingers around it. You can keep it while you practice. Mason swallowed. That seems fair. I had been standing near the sink with my arms folded, trying not to let hope make decisions for me. Mason rose, but he did not move closer. I withdrew the restaurant proposal and told the legal team to discard the term. Cheat, he said. Good. I told my mother that she would no longer decide who sits at my table. That is your table. This is about more than your table. I know. His voice softened. I resigned from 2 family boards this week. Not because you asked. You did not. I did it because I realized I had spent years calling obligations values simply because I was afraid to disappoint people who were never satisfied. I looked at him. What happens when they blame me? They will not have access to you unless you choose it. I will not hide behind you, Claire. The decision was mine, and I have made that clear. And Caroline? Caroline sent me a congratulatory bottle of champagne, and a note saying she was relieved she would not have to marry a man who organizes breakfast like a board meeting. I tried not to smile. She sounds reasonable. Painfully. Rain whispered against the glass. Noah climbed onto a chair and opened the grocery bag. The blueberries are cold. Mason glanced at the stove. I was told there would be an apron. I handed him the blue one Noah had decorated with the crooked sun. It was too small. The strings barely reached around his waist. Noah laughed so hard he had to hold the table. Mason tied it anyway. He measured the flour with the precision of an engineer. He cracked the first egg too hard and spent 30 seconds removing pieces of shell. He stirred until the batter became heavy and stubborn. You are overworking it, I said. I am mixing it. Aggressively. It has not cooperated. It is pancake batter, Mason. It does not report to you. Noah leaned over the bowl. Maybe ask nicely. Mason looked at the batter. Please improve. It did not. The first pancake burned on one side and remained wet on the other. Smoke rose from the skillet. The smoke alarm began to chirp, then scream. Mason stared at the pancake as though it had betrayed him personally. Noah waved a dish towel beneath the detector. Breakfast is yelling. Mason looked at me. I looked at the blackened circle on the spatula. Then I laughed. Not politely. Not carefully. I laughed until my eyes watered and the kitchen felt too small to hold the sound. Mason's expression broke. A real smile appeared, slow and surprised, changing his entire face. Noah pointed at the pancake. That side is tragic. He flipped it with the spatula and examined the other side. But this side still has potential. Mason turned toward me. The laughter faded, leaving something quieter between us. I did not come to take you back to the estate, he said. I did not come to offer another arrangement. I came to ask whether I can become someone you might choose to let in. That will take time. I know. You will make mistakes. He glanced at the skillet. There is evidence. You cannot solve every mistake with money. I am beginning to suspect money is less useful than advertised. I stepped closer and adjusted the loose apron strap at his shoulder. You can start with breakfast. He nodded. Breakfast, then. I did not forgive him in one morning. Real trust did not return like a light switched on. It returned in small, ordinary pieces. Mason came to our apartment on Sundays. He learned to wash dishes without asking where the staff kept the towels. With my permission, he attended school performances and joined us for one parent-teacher conference. He came on grocery store trips and survived one terrible children's magic show where Noah volunteered him to hold a rubber chicken. He listened when I spoke. More importantly, he changed his plans when my answer was no. By the following fall, Whitmore Holdings had converted an unused restaurant inside one of its smaller Stanford hotels into a licensed culinary training kitchen. The program offered paid apprenticeships, on-site childcare, and business classes for single parents entering the restaurant industry. Mason asked me to design it. He did not ask me to belong to him. He asked me to lead. I named it the Second Side Kitchen. On opening morning, sunlight poured through the front windows while 12 new students stood behind polished counters. Ruth wore her red scarf. Caroline sent flowers. Victoria came quietly and stayed near the back. She did not apologize with words, but when Noah dropped a spoon, she picked it up and handed it to him without looking around to see who had noticed. It was not everything. It was a beginning. Mason stood beside me in a chef's jacket Noah had insisted he wear. A smell drifted from the demonstration station. Bitter. Familiar. Noah ran through the kitchen carrying a spatula. Dad, the pancakes are burning. Mason left a conversation with 3 board members in the middle of a sentence and followed him without hesitation. I watched him go. Once he had ruled every room by making people wait for him. Now one small voice could call him home. He had spent years believing family was a name carried through generations, protected by money, tradition, and perfect appearances. Noah taught him something simpler. Family was the person who sat beside you after the smoke cleared, looked at the burn side of what you had made, and still believed the other side had potential.